So today we are going to continue with the idea of formulas based on the coordinate points. So today is week 3, day 2, 1.3 midpoint formula. So yesterday we did 1.3 coordinate geometry midpoint and distance formulas. That is still our same topic today. However, instead of doing the distance formula, we're going to be doing the formula for midpoint. So before we continue with the formulas, we should talk about some definitions. The first one being the word congruent. This is an extremely important term in geometry. We're going to use it all of this semester and most of next semester as well. And it comes up through mathematics past geometry. So the basic concept of congruent is to have the same shape and measure. So you couldn't have a segment congruent to an angle or a circle congruent to a square. Those have to be the same shape initially, and then you can compare their measures. A midpoint, by definition, this is one of those nice geometry terms that's kind of telling you what it is without telling you what it is. So it's a middle point. Unfortunately, that is not the actual definition, but it gives you the general idea. So it is in fact a point that divides a segment or the segment into two congruent smaller segments. So yes, it's in the middle because these two pieces to the right and to the left of the midpoint are congruent, and so they're identical. So you'll notice there's red tick marks or hash marks. These indicate that these two segments are congruent. So how do you know something's a midpoint? Initially, we're either going to be told it's a midpoint. So if you're told, then you're going to see it in words. Point M is the midpoint of segment AB, or sometimes you're shown that there's a midpoint. And in this case, we're being shown that. In that point M is the same distance to A as it is to B through the congruent marks. These two are interchangeable in which one comes first, but whichever one it is that comes first, the other comes exactly with it. So if I tell you it's a midpoint, you could draw this picture. If I gave you this picture, then you could tell me it's a midpoint. Since geometry is all about logic and process, order and process, then we have to know what else goes along with these two statements. So we're going to start at the top and think about this as a progression. So you're shown it's a midpoint in a picture, so you're going to say it's a midpoint. M is the midpoint of segment AB. What do we know about a midpoint? A midpoint makes two congruent segments. So the next thing that we can say is that segment AM is congruent to segment MB. Segment AM is congruent to segment MB. So here's a new symbol for us. It stands for is congruent to, and it's an equal sign with a tilde. So segment AM is congruent to segment MB. So even though the definition is same shape, same measure, we only say that the sticks, the things that are tangible, are congruent. So what does that mean? I mean, shouldn't we be using the whole definition? Well, we're going to. Since we can see that these are the same shape, they're both segments, and they're congruent, then we also know that their measures are equal. So the length of AM is equal to the length of MB. So this is a logical progression in geometry. If you're given a picture like this, then you can say that point M is a midpoint. And if point M is the midpoint, then you know there are two congruent segments. And if you have two congruent segments, then you know their measures are equal. Let's talk about the midpoint formula. So just like yesterday, we have segment AB. Point A is the ordered pair x sub 1, y sub 1, and point B is the ordered pair x sub 2, y sub 2. Remember, the subtext are simply letting you know where those numbers are coming from. Is it coming from point A or is it coming from point B? Here is point M, the midpoint, and you'll notice it's just the ordered pair x, y, because we're going to default to x and y as being an answer, not so much a number being plugged in. That does not mean it's always going to be that way, but that's where we're going to default. So we're going to go back and look at this again as the hypotenuse of a right triangle. We're going to use that right triangle to our benefit, but not like yesterday. We are not using the Pythagorean theorem. So you'll notice point B has an x value. If we come straight down, everything on this line would have that same x value. So this end is x sub 2, while this end is x sub 1. So where is x? Where is it right in the middle of these two? It's exactly in the middle when we take the average. So if we average out the two x's, we'll get the x in the middle, and you see that it lines up with the midpoint. Same thing for the y. So we know up here is y sub 2, and if we follow the a coordinate out, the y coordinate of the point A, this is x, y sub 1. So y sub 2 and y sub 1 average out to give you a single y value, and it's in line with the midpoint as well. So that's how you're going to get the x coordinate and the y coordinate. So why do I mention all that? Because I'm trying to explain to you that yes, there's a formula. I'm going to give you a formula. We're going to write down the formula, but how did it come to be? Just like yesterday, we wrote down the distance formula, but if we realize it's based on the Pythagorean theorem, then we don't have to memorize the formula so much. If we can kind of rebuild it every time we need it because we know it's the Pythagorean theorem. So the midpoint formula is averages. So how do you do an average? You add the numbers together and you divide by how many you have. Well, in this case, there are 2. So here are my 2 x values. I'm going to add and divide by 2. This average will give me the x coordinate. We're going to add the 2, divide by 2. This average is going to give me the y coordinate. So what does that look like? Find the coordinates of the midpoint of segment RS with the given endpoints. Now you can graph these if you would like, if you'd like a visual assistance, but you don't have to. Where we're going to start is with the formula. We always start with the formula. You'll notice there aren't any of the given numbers in there yet, because this formula applies to every midpoint problem. So we write it down every single time, because when it comes time for a quiz or a test or a state test, you don't get a note sheet. You have to know that formula. So the more we write it, the better off we're going to be. So the midpoint xy will be found by averaging out the x's and then separately averaging out the y's. We're not going to add these together because it's not a single value. It's an ordered pair. So we're going to do what we did yesterday. Go to the second x, -3. Go to the first x, -7. So -3 plus -3 plus -7 over 2. And then go to the second y, 7, plus the first y, -5. So 7 plus -5. As we talked about yesterday, this is probably not the way you're actually going to write it. If you do, that's okay. But algebraically, it looks more like this. M, which is the ordered pair xy, would be equal to the average -3 minus 7 over 2 and the average 7 minus 5 over 2. Okay. So we get -10 over 2 and 2 over 2. So M is the ordered pair xy is equal to -10 over 2 and 2 over 2. but that's reducible. So point M turns out to be -1 positive. Said that wrong. M, the midpoint, turns out to be -5 positive 1 by simply substituting and simplifying. Please note there's no equal sign here because this answer is this. So you'll notice there's no equal sign. Let's try that again. Find the coordinates of the midpoint of segment PQ with the given endpoints. Please pause the video and write down the formula. And once you have it written down, start the video up so you can see if you were correct. So the midpoint is the ordered pair XY equals the average of the X's, comma, the average of the Y's. So we're going to take the second X, -1 plus 4 over 2, and the second Y, 6 plus 3 over 2. Now, what if you wrote this down and you said it the other way around? What if you said 4 minus 1 and 6 plus 2? That's fine. This really, the formula is actually telling you just keep the order the same. Whatever order you picked here, you'll notice this is the same order. So simplifying that, we get M is the ordered pair of 3 halves, 9 halves. You'll notice I'm already at the answer. I'm done. What do you mean I'm done? Don't you have to do something with those? No, you don't. They are already in lowest form. They cannot be reduced anymore. You could, if you wanted to, make them mixed, 1 1/2 for X and then 4 1/2 for Y, but you don't have to. You could make them a decimal, but you don't have to. So 1 1/2 and 4 1/2. But since the fractions are already in lowest form, simplified the most, leave them alone. No need of doing extra work. Okay. So example 1 and example 2 are the most typical type of problems that we're going to do with midpoint, but sometimes we change it up just a little bit. Use the given endpoint R, which is -4, -6, and the midpoint M, which is 3, -4, of the segment RS, to find the coordinates of the other endpoint. What do you mean the other endpoint? Didn't I get that? No. You got one endpoint and the midpoint. It's still a midpoint question, so you're still going to start with the midpoint formula. That is not going to change. How you substitute into it is how it's going to change. So this time we actually know this left side to start with. So the midpoint is 3, -4 is going to be substituted on the left, and on the right we're only going to substitute one of the x's. From experience, I would suggest that you substitute in the second value just for later on work, but it doesn't really matter. So the midpoint is 3, -4. That's what they told us. We need to add a -4, so x minus 4, and we need to do y plus a -6, so y minus 6. Each of them is being divided by 2. So same exact formula, it's just what I'm substituting. So the easiest way to do this at this point is to literally break this problem apart. So we know that this average of the x's will produce the 3 from the midpoint. So I'm going to separate it that way. This average of the x's will produce, or is equal to, the 3 from the midpoint. So order of operations says we're going to multiply by 2 because we were dividing by 2. So now we have 6, so times 2 on the right, times 2 on the left. 6 equals x minus 4. So then I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So the x value for our missing endpoint is 10. Okay, so we're going to do that again. This y average is going to end up producing a -4. So this y average is equal to -4. Again, we need to multiply both sides by 2. So we get negative 8 equals y minus 6. We're going to add 6. So negative 8 plus 6 is negative 2. So for our missing endpoint, we have an x of 10 and a y of negative 2. So our final answer is point S is the ordered pair 10, negative 2. So as long as it's a midpoint question and its coordinates, this is the formula you're going to use with the averages. Make sure that you write the formula, substitute appropriately, and then either just simplify, which was examples 1 and 2, or do some algebraic calculations, which is number 3 here, the missing endpoint. Remember, if you have any questions, please email your teacher. They can set up a private Zoom conversation with you to try to explain it, or a phone conversation, or try to answer your question through the email. Please be very specific about your questions. The ever famous, I don't understand it. There's a lot of things in each lesson. It's a little hard for us to answer you, so please make sure that you're giving us specific questions for us to give you feedback on. We're happy to help you in any way we can.